It's a catchy air.
I know. Expect Rick O'Dell to be introducing us next on Smooth Jazz.
From the John DeVita Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Armchair Experts with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich on Wednesday, August the 9th, the year 2017. And now, here they are, the same as they were in July, in August, Jim and Rich.
Still sitting in the same spot.
Same spots, just a few days older, no matter what it is.
John comes down and sprays every once in a while.
Yeah, I know.
To make sure that, the odor goes away.
Fumigates the place. I mean, it's not like we're doing sports writers and a bunch of guys sitting around here with cigars.
For sure. John, he'd throw us out if somebody lit up a cigar.
We've already tried to solve one problem for John today, and I think we got some work done on that.
I'll tell you, John DeVita is one of those under-the-radar, unsung hero guys, in my opinion, because what you're referring to is a station, not the station we're on, but we're trying to get the oldies radio station.
The old time radio. Not station. Oldies. There's difference.
The oldies is a different thing.
Yeah.
The old time radio station going, and John is a major part of that. Yeah. And Jim was, throwing in some advice, which he's, he's got some expertise in the area.
I got an opinion on everything. So. It was kind of funny. I was listening. Actually, I heard the podcast. From the other day, our friend Roger Badish, who was on with us a year and a half or so ago, talking about his teaching of radio and communications, and also I think we touched a little bit on old-time radio. He was on with, he does the news on Sunday night on WGN. He was on with Rick Kogan talking about how his interest in old-time radio developed, and he's doing an old-time radio show with the AFTRA-SAG radio players on Thursday, the 10th, at the Cultural Center downtown. He's doing, and I can't remember the two shows he's doing. He's narrating one of them.
Jim, that reminds me, after the show, if you could remember to give me, or one of us remembers, that I need Roger's phone number, because when you mentioned that he talked to... or that he does the news, and Rick Kogan Rick Kogan's got a show on Sunday?
Rick Kogan's on 9 to 11 on Sunday night.
Okay. I need to speak to Rick Kogan. He would be one of two guys that I need to speak to. But in terms of the Norwich History Museum, when we used to have the Earl of Old Town on Harlem, I cannot find any... indication of the performers there, and because Earl
Pianki passed away a couple of years ago, I think.
Yeah, well, my question would be this: Bonnie Kolak, who are the other two? Steve Goodman.
Steve Goodman,
and the third is John
Prine.
Prine were all friends with Earl and performed at the Earl of Old Town in Old Town. And I'm thinking, because when he started his new venture on Harlem, that to generate some traffic and business, that those three performers may have performed there, and I need to find out whether they did or not.
I have vague memories of being in there once. Mm-hmm. I can't pin it down for sure, but I swear to God, Steve Goodman was there that night, and virtually being ignored.
You know what, Jim? I just need to find somebody who can tell me for sure that those three or any other notable person performed there.
Gentlemen, we have a gentleman that's with us on Meet the Chicago Story. His name is Rich Lang. Do you know him?
Sure, I know Rich.
Yeah, okay. He's with the old time radio stuff with Norwich also, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And also talking about WGN on Sunday nights. Do you gentlemen ever hear of a guy by the name of Dane Neal that's on that nighttime?
I remember Dane from. Didn't he used to
Dane Neal used
partner up with Joe Gentile in the
Joe
morning?
Gentile, that's right.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you a little story about Dane. One Saturday, he comes into the studios at WJJG to sit in for a show, and he said to me, he says, "I've got a major problem at home." I says, "What's the matter?" And I worked at his house a couple times. He says, "We lost our power, and we're not going to get our power back for a few days." And he says, "And I have saltwater fish." He says, "I'm afraid without power, they're gonna
spoil.
they're gonna die on me."
Oh, there's live fish. Okay.
Yeah,
Live fish.
So as soon as we got done, as soon as we were done with the show and my other engineer came in, I went to Dane's house, and in the back seat of my truck, even across the street, I have a power inverter. You hook the power inverter to your battery and then run an extension cord and it gives you electricity. Mm-hmm. So I ran from the truck into his house, and I helped save his saltwater fish.
There you go.
All right.
All right.
Yep.
Can we consider that as the fishing story for the day?
I think so.
I think so,
That's
John.
the fishing story.
I think
That's the fishing story for today.
I think so.
Yeah.
And it's you should have seen the ones that almost got away.
Yeah. And Dr. Chekowicz, who I'm going to see at 3 o'clock today, he tells me that Dane Neal's on WGN on Sunday evenings. So I don't know what time or whatever, but I like to.
I don't know. I don't know what Roger comes. Rogers. What is he usually? 6 until 1:30 in the morning, and he does traffic for part of the time and news. Mm-hmm. And it's been fun when he's been with Rick Kogan, because this is the 4th time he sat down with Rick Kogan to talk about his life and everything else. And Roger keeps saying, "I'm not interesting. Why you want with what do you want with me?" But Kogan's great skill is to find the different stories. I was going to say the oddball stories, but that's Roger.
Yeah,
Sure.
Unless a Dane pinches for one of those two gentlemen, that could be possible too.
I don't know. I
have to find out.
Yeah, you have to find out. So
Definitely.
yeah. So it was kind of interesting. I got to find this here. The other day, our pal Stat Boy Steve, posted under his real name.
Good for him.
Even though
out of the closet.
Even though he does claim Stat Boy is a legitimate individual who lives down in the basement, comes up for pizza and Mountain Dew every so often.
I know Mountain Dew he's hung up on that stuff.
And leaves these little missives that we've talked about. Steve talked on August 6th. He posted a little story about the day he went to see his first Major League Baseball game.
You're kidding.
August 6, 1969, the Cincinnati.
1969. Okay.
The Cincinnati Reds beat the New York Mets 3-2 at Crosley Field before a crowd of 17,452. The game was significant because the Mets fell 9 games behind the Chicago Cubs. The Mets then went on a 41-15 run to end the season, while Cub fans found a list of causes for their claps. The Black Cat, Leo DeRocher, Steve Bartman, if he were born then, Don Young, etc. Among those fans was a 9-year-old excited out of his skin to be at his first Major League game at a Major League ballpark. Until then, his experiences with the Reds were mainly on the radio with Jim McIntyre and Joe Nuxall, with occasional plugs from the old riverboat captain for Wiedemann beer. Accompanied by his great aunt and a lifelong friend of the family, he experienced perhaps the most exciting 2 hours and 2 minutes of his life, and the Reds won. Icing on the cake. Lolly, Leonard, I still remember. Thank you for that evening. And yes, the Reds today could use a little Wayne Granger and or Jim Maloney.
Yeah.
And I thought about that, and I looked when I went to my first game. Mm-hmm. When the first time I saw baseball live, and I dug around, and it was 10 years and 1 day prior to his. 10 years and 1 day prior to his, August 5th, 1959, a game at Wrigley Field against the Phillies. Cubs lost 6-4.
Oh, yeah. I can't tell you. I can't give you a date. The first game I saw, I'm going to guess, would have been 1958. Mm-hmm. The Cubs and the Pirates, and have no idea who won or lost. But I understand the feeling of being thrilled to be there. We were lucky enough to. I was with my dad, my grandfather, and a friend of my grandfather's, and we sat and. We had box seats, so we were pretty close to the action. That was
in those days of $3 box seats.
Yeah. Ernie Banks and Roberto Clemente were the featured players that day. Yeah. You didn't know from Bill Mazurowski.
Yeah.
My grandfather would say, "See this guy, Roberto Clemente stepped in." He goes, "Now watch what he does, but don't do anything he does because he does everything wrong, but he's a great hitter." And surely he stepped in the bucket and everything else.
Everything, yeah. He. I think I can't remember if it was him or Mays hit one that was probably the longest ball I've ever seen at Wrigley Field. I think it left the park just to the right of the scoreboard.
That was him, Clemente. Because
I was at that game.
If you remember, now this would be. Wow, that was a heck of a game to be at, Jim.
Yeah.
This would have been, now it would be ancient history, but in '61, because of the Maris Mantle home run race, there were editions of sports magazines being put out strictly dedicated to the home run race and, strictly dedicated to the home run. And in one of those magazines that I bought, because I was an avid baseball fan, even as a 10-year-old, they had pictures of the different stadiums and the longest balls hit in them. And in Wrigley, at that point, and there could be longer ones hit now, I'm not sure, but Clemente's was the longest, and it showed it passing the scoreboard.
Passing the scoreboard.
Yeah. Which is a shot. I would say that's estimated well over 500 feet.
Yeah, because nobody has ever hit the scoreboard, other than Sam Snead with a driver.
Yeah.
But nobody's ever hit the old scoreboard.
Now, the interesting thing, I'd say the two guys that probably have rivaled Clemente's shot, but I'm not sure because it was the left field. They may not have been as long. But Glenn Ellen Hill hit one on the building across the street.
Yeah,
on top of it, and then Kingman hit one.
Kingman
that rolled down. I don't know which
landed
street it is.
Landed in a yard about 2 or 3 houses from the corner on Kenmore.
Yeah.
And what was funny about that was all of a sudden they've got the camera on that, and all of a sudden you see a guy come running down the stairs. Run into the yard, pick up the ball, and run back up.
Yeah,
he was sitting inside. He was. I think that was
it's on YouTube, so you can see it.
Yeah, it's on YouTube, but I think that was the 23-22 game.
I don't know about that. Not sure
against
about that.
Against the Phillies.
So you were there the day Clemente hit that shot.
I remember that. I wish I had. That was one of those you look at and you go, oh.
Well, the one you did miss, Jim, though, that was it's got Clemente's beat by a ton, was when Ed Bailey hit one and the guy in the last row of the right field bleachers stood up to catch it and hit him in the head and bounced onto the street. That was a good one.
The one I remember, and back in the days, back in our days growing up, 6,500 was a big crowd at Wrigley Field.
What did Steve say at Crosley?
17-4. I mean, the Cubs would have killed for 17-4.
But back in those days, those weren't 17,000 was not a bad crowd.
No,
especially if it was like a weekday or something.
The game that I went to, my first game, I think the attendance was something like 9,400.
You may have noticed. I went, and all I noticed was, let's see, I want to say Cal Neiman and somebody were in they had a little, thank you, John. They had a little sort of fenced-off area under the grandstands, I guess, where they would have several players there to sign autographs.
Oh.
I think that day was there Cal Neiman. I want to say, I think Randy Jackson was one of the guys who was there.
No, Jackson. I was trying to remember. I think Jackson came back to the Cubs in '59.
So,
and he ended his career in '59.
either that was a game that I went to later on, or maybe it wasn't the first game that I went to. But I remember going to a game, and Jackson was one of the guys signing.
Yeah.
But what I do remember is the first time you walk up and you see a Major League Baseball field. Wow, what a thrill!
I have there's a friend of mine. She lives up in Grand Rapids. That just a diehard, absolutely rabid Cub fan. In fact, her email address, her last name is her name is Lori Beard, and her email address is Beard Cub.
Oh wow!
I always, if I send her a note, I always refer to her as Beard Cub.
Yeah.
But we have gone to games, and I've met her, and we always have to, no matter where the seats are, we have to come in to the ballpark down in the right field corner and walk along, because the first time she went to a game, that's how she came into the ballpark with her dad. And she's always looked at it, and, it still takes her breath away.
Yeah.
Every time
no
she
doubt.
comes in. The other one that I was going to look up and I didn't was I didn't get a chance to, was talking about memories, my first Sox game the following year. Because I'm not quite sure the details of how it was and who was pitching that night, but it was a game against the Yankees, and whoever was pitching, was pitching his arm off, and goes into the ninth. And I think I've probably told this story. I'm sure I've told this story on the air because I repeat things because I don't remember anymore. John can relate to that. But it was a Friday night game. We had gone to the game with my uncle's church group, St. John Bosco, over on Austin Avenue. And I remember because in those days, there was before Vatican II, so there was no meet on Friday. It was a Friday night game.
Okay.
And everybody's on the bus, and we're ready to go, and the priest gets on the bus, and one guy yells out the back, he says, "Father, I'll let you out of the bed if you let me have a hot dog." And the other thing, well, the way it all was, we were sitting out in left field in the old ballpark. And we had, great view of the field. I mean, we were like in the first couple of rows.
Where were you sitting?
Left field.
Okay.
In Comiskey. Yeah, left field. So we had a view of really the whole field. And all the kids were in the front row, and all the adults were sitting behind. So whoever was pitching, goes into the bottom of goes into the ninth, and it's 2-1 lead maybe. And Stengel sends up Berra to pitch hit.
Uh-oh.
And puts it into the seats.
That figures.
Now we got a tie ball game. And everybody yelled, and this was 1960, so this was the first year of the original exploding scoreboard.
Okay.
And somebody yelled, "Look at the Yankee dugout."
Oh, they had the sparklers?
And they had the sparklers.
Game?
That was the sparkler game.
Oh, my God.
And they lit, and they're all running around the dugout waving the sparkler.
Yeah, I remember. Vec wrote about that.
Vec wrote about that, and I talked about a number of years ago. I think it was the year of the baseball strike. The year of the baseball strike, when they were doing it, the Sox promotion decided that year, even though they didn't know when or if the season was going to get started, they were going to start an ad campaign, and they were going to call it they called it Dear Sox.
Okay.
And their advertisement in the paper was, "Tell us something. Tell us a memory about a baseball game.
Sure.
Tell us about your Uncle Harry's new trailer.
Yeah.
Tell us to go to hell. We don't really care. Just tell us something." And I wrote the letter about that, and I got invited down to do an audition for that. They had a big call. Hey, I got me wound up with 2 tickets to a Sox game. But I got invited down to do an audition for the commercial campaign. And I did the audition, and I did the take, and I talked about it. And Bob Grimm, who's one of the promotional guys with the Sox, and I think had some time in the majors too.
The pitcher, Bob Grimm? Oh yeah, sure.
Or his brother. I can't remember. I always get him confused. But he talked about he said I knew Bill.
Mm-hmm.
He says, because I mentioned at the end, I says, and I always wondered why Bill Veeck never had Casey Stengel arrested for possession of illegal fireworks. And he said, well, I know Bill, and he said there were two things that he was probably going through his mind when he saw that.
He loved it.
One, he was laughing.
Yes.
And two, he was trying to figure out how to get even.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds like the Veeck that I've read about.
Yeah. He said he was laughing too hard, and the other one was trying to figure out how to get even. So that was, but that was a game I think in May of 1960. I'll have to look it up.
I can't tell you what year it was, but I remember I went to see the Sox with Neil Nellis. I think Neil was a Sox fan at the time. He may have switched back and forth. But and there's probably more than just Neil and I, but there was probably a group, but I don't remember who was in it. I want to say we sat on the first base side, but more like just to the first base side of home plate. And Ray Herbert pitched, but I don't know if he pitched for the Sox or it might have been the A's that we saw. I don't even remember that. But the one thing I do remember is that the guy who was one of the owners of the company my dad worked for was a gentleman by the name of Bill DeLama. And his daughter, Sandy, who was maybe, maybe a year or two older than I was, so she would have been in high school. I was probably still in grade school, was the president of the Mike Hirschberger fan club. And I go down here with instructions, you got to meet up with Sandy, and I'm like, I'm not meeting up with Sandy. So it ends up, Neil and I and whoever we're with get on the L to start to go back home. And who's sitting there? I mean, and I don't even know how we started it into the conversation, but it ends up, I bump into Sandy DeLama on the train, only time I've ever seen the lady ever in my life, and maybe they had things that indicated they were the Mike Hirschberger fan club, but I'm thinking, Jesus, the Mike Hirschberger fan club. I mean, Mike Hirschberger might have been with the Sox a couple years, but and it's cool, I mean, people say, hey, we're going to pick out this person, and he's going to be our guy.
He was one everybody thought, oh, he's going to be a star, and never made it.
No, he was just a journey. He might have played with another team or so.
I think he might have.
But
I think he might have. It was kind of interesting last night, too, when I looked this up and I was talking to Dana, because I mentioned I looked at the lineup for both teams that day. I'm at baseballreference.com has got box scores going all the way back to 1913 on their website. And I looked at the lineup, and I told Dana, being a girl who grew up in the Detroit area, in the suburbs of Detroit, I said, guess who played second base for the Phillies that day? And she went, who? I went, Sparky Anderson.
Wow. And he only played 1 year.
1 year in the majors. And she said, what was his major league career like? I said, he only played 1 year in the majors. He was in the Brooklyn system.
Yes,
and then he went. Then he went over to Cleveland, I think, and then played a couple of years in the Milwaukee.
Did he?
Farm
his
system.
only major league year was that year with the Phillies.
Only year was that year with the Phillies.
Jim, I have nothing to prove this, but a guy like Sparky Anderson, who obviously was a baseball junkie, I'm thinking that especially when you had organizations like the Dodgers that were deep. So this guy came up. They probably it wasn't his ability that hooked them, but the fact that, man, this guy is like a baseball junkie. He's a hustler. He's this, and then as a favor, I'd say the only way I could put it is they would move him on to an organization where, maybe you're going to play in the majors for a year or something, as a favor, because this guy is, he's not going to be a career major leaguer, but you want him to have that experience.
You want him to have that, and he played. If I think I remember, he played 152 ball games.
Yeah, in fact, if you look at his stats, they weren't horrible. I think he probably was like a 240 maybe.
No,
or something like that.
I think that year in the major, I think he was He made the Mendoza line, but it was about 2:15 or something
Was
like
it?
that.
I
can't remember.
Think it might have been more, but
Okay.
But it's as long as we're sort of going. I didn't know what we're going to talk about. We never do.
Like we never do.
The other day, and I don't know if I brought this up to you before, Jim. And I've already thought this out, so I'm laying this on you fresh. But I'm thinking if you take each of the major, what I would consider the major sports: baseball, basketball, football, hockey. Who is the most recognized? If you had to say one name that was most recognizable to the general public in each sport, and you could, for the entire time the sport's been around professionally, who would you pick? And baseball, the first person I would think of, who would just
first name I would pop into my head if you just mentioned baseball, I'd think of Babe Ruth.
So Babe Ruth is what I would say. Now, and again, this is not fair because I've already thought it out and I have answers. But how about say basketball?
Probably the first name that would pop into my head, and I was thinking about, and I'll say it popped into my head because I was looking at the Sports Illustrated recently had their "Where Are They Now" issue, and there was an article in there about Tom Meschery.
Okay,
and it made me. I would think of and then it popped into my head Will Chamberlain.
Will Chamberlain, okay. Because my thought would be, at one time I would have said Wilt probably, but I would say Michael Jordan at this point.
Right, yeah. If I hadn't read that article, that would have been the name that would have come into my mind first.
I found that
football.
Well, go ahead. I'll give you mine.
I would think of Walter Payton probably because my Bear.
Yeah,
connection.
I'm not explaining my thought process on this as well. I would say there's two people: Red Grange, the Galloping Ghost, and Joe Namath, Broadway Joe Namath.
Yeah.
I would say I'm talking about recognizable characters to the general. Like even if you're not a football fan, you probably would know back in the day the Galloping Ghost,
sure.
Red Grange, and then in later days Broadway Joe Namath as a just a personality. Hockey I found to be the most difficult, and I'm not sure that my answer is the best one, but he's probably my favorite player, so mine was Bobby Orr.
A lot of times you start to think about eras that people played in, and Orr, Hull would come into my mind. Mm-hmm. Bobby Hull would come in. Gordie Howe.
Gordie Howe, right.
I don't recall because he retired probably the year I started getting a little more interested in watching hockey, and we never saw that much of it on TV. But obviously Maurice Richard. Mm-hmm. But I remember more of his brother,
Henri Richard.
Henri Richard, and some of those great Canadian teams.
Sure. I think hockey's is more difficult to cast a guy in the sort of light that I'm thinking about, because I'm thinking the people that we named are personalities basically almost outside of their sport because of what they did in the sport.
Sure,
Babe Ruth,
sure.
Michael Jordan, and
sure.
Hockey, I don't know that actually has had a person that you could fit in the same role. They've had great players.
They've had great players. Maybe Gretzky.
Gretzky's a possible.
Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, he would be a possible.
He just because of really what he did in the sport. Would I think he was a great personality outside of the sport? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Hard to say.
Hard to
Gretzky
say.
was another one I thought of, or Gretzky, but hockey hasn't had that. You go to Spain and you see a Michael Jordan jersey. The Japanese used to say "F Babe Ruth" to the GIs in the in World War II. So those guys are known all over the world.
Yeah.
And hockey, I don't think has had that type of
No,
type of guy.
no, it's never really come to that. Although if you think about it, how international hockey is now with the players that are playing over here, you got Marian Hossa and Zdeno Chara, her neighbors.
Yeah, yeah,
back in the Czech Republic.
yeah.
One lives across the street from the other.
Yeah, that's
but I think the issue with hockey is a lot of times you always watch hockey and these guys are small town guys.
true.
The Canadian guys or the guys from northern Minnesota, small town, and they kind of maintain that small town persona.
Yeah,
all the way through.
That's really why they're a lot of them are known as really good guys as far as fan-friendly guys and whatnot.
Yeah.
So is John?
Are you getting? I was looking at it. It's 12:30.
Yeah,
or it says half an hour in there. So why don't we take a break?
You're listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Wednesday, August the 9th, the year 2017, with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. And this is Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich, Illinois. And now back to Armchair Experts with Jim and Rich.
As we wander down memory lane today.
Jim, and
we started out with old-time radio, and now we've just continued reminiscing today.
You're going to laugh, though, when I say, how do you say the name Scearce? Is it scarce? Is it Circe? Would you say?
S-C what?
Scearce.
Probably Circe.
Circe. Because
scarce.
Scarce. Yeah. In the football part of the sports section yesterday, the Bears' first exhibition game is Thursday.
Thursday.
The writer, and I can't remember which writer because there's more than one that covers the Bears for the Sun-Times, but had said that watch these guys in the exhibition game. Tanner Gentry, who's a wide receiver, thank you, John, from Wyoming, and I took a look at him, some of the things on YouTube about him prior to coming here. Was a prolific receiver for University of Wyoming Cowboys. The other guy, though, there was 4 or 5 guys, but the 2 names that I remembered was Gentry. The other guy is Alex Scarce. I'm not sure how you say his name. Outside linebacker, was a defensive safety and moved to linebacker from Coastal Carolina.
Is yesterday's paper or today's?
It's yesterday's paper. And I'm just, I looked at his size. He's not a huge guy. He's 220 pounds, 6'2", 6'3". But when I looked at his bio or his draft bio, they said extremely intelligent player. And, one of his weaknesses would be because he's fairly new to the position, doesn't always react as quickly as he might, but very intelligent guy. If you look at the last article or in the notes, okay, what do you got there? Looked right at the end on the right.
Okay, Tanner Gentry, Dion Bush, Capron Lewis Moore, Dan Skuda, and in the outside linebacker Dan Skuda, and inside linebacker Alex Scarce, probably. That'd probably be the way to pronounce it.
Yeah. For some reason, he's spotlighting those guys to take a look at it in the exhibition game, though he doesn't really say why. I assume those guys will be playing some good minutes because it's the first exhibition.
It's the first exhibition game. You're going to see the starters for what, maybe a quarter?
Yeah.
And okay, that'll be interesting to watch. I'm going to try to set some time aside on Thursday and watch them because I'm curious about this team. Shaheen is apparently making quite the splash.
Well, think of You know, Jim, you had said a couple of times, and I didn't want to question you on the air about it, but when his name came up after the draft, you saw he's got to trim down a little bit. But I've never read anything about that. I mean, he's a big man, but they seem to be satisfied with his conditioning and everything.
I mean, the rap early on was, he needs to lose a little weight.
Yeah. But who was saying that, though, Jim? Who did you hear that?
Oh, I don't know. Probably one damn talking head or another.
Probably.
One or another. But the listening to him, the afternoon guys on the Score had him on yesterday, and they kind of asked him. They asked him, when did you think you could make it as a football player? And do you regret staying where you did at Ashland and not moving to a bigger school? He said, well, he had played basketball for a couple of years there, and then all of us, he was playing football, and he says, I took a look at myself one day, and I suddenly thought, you know what, I might be able to do this.
Yeah.
I might be able to do this. And he said, well, why didn't you transfer? He goes, it was a good program. Ashland was a good program. Yeah, and he liked it there. I'm optimistic. I find myself being strangely optimistic about this ball club this year, and I don't know why.
Well, you know what? Did you see? I don't know if you read it, but they had the article about Jay Cutler signing. It's in that group of 10 things that the writer enumerates, and he doesn't knock Cutler, but he says, it's amazing that it seems like everybody is commenting on the leadership ability of Glennon. They're not saying anything negative about Cutler, but everybody is saying, geez, Glennon is this guy is really a leader. And the writer comments that, where was Glennon from? What school?
North Carolina State.
North Carolina State.
That there was no comment about his leadership ability.
Right. They didn't see that as when he was coming out of school as they didn't say it was a weakness, but they didn't say it as a strength either. What's interesting is when a guy maybe gets a chance, it's who knows what can be done. It wouldn't surprise me, Jim, if Glennon had a good year and that Trubisky maybe doesn't get a shot at playing until 3-4 years down the road.
A couple of years down the road. I think in the ideal situation, this is what you want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, where else would you select someone, hire him for your team, pay him a lot of money, and hope to God he doesn't play?
Yeah, well, that's
other than the NFL quarterback.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
How many years did Aaron Rodgers sit before you? 3, 4?
Aaron Rodgers, I don't know. He was behind Favre for a while. I'm not sure how many years. And finally, they figured, okay, Favre's not getting any younger. They just they let him go, and Rodgers moved in.
And
I think there's some depth here. That one of the names that you mentioned here in that 4 or 5 that he mentioned to look at, Dan Skuta. Dan Skuta was a starter for the 49ers, went to the Jaguars for some fairly big money, so he must have been well thought of. He's an outside linebacker. And now I don't know if he had injury problems in Jacksonville, but now the Bears have signed him. I'm not saying Skuta's going to be, who knows if he'll even make the team, but if you have guys like that who at one time were quality guys, not that old, they're pushing the other guys.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is maybe some depth.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're going to have the depth at every position, but we're starting to get some depth at some positions.
And that's the thing that you're getting. You're getting an offensive line that's better.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting some. Although with who was it? Blew his hamstring out. Kush.
Kush did. Yeah.
Done for the season.
Oh, he is. I didn't know. Okay,
yeah, it tore completely away.
Okay.
So he's going to have surgery.
Okay. But it gives somebody else a chance.
Give somebody else. I can't remember who they moved over to try it.
Now, he was not going to be starting, though.
And
no. Here's the thing,
but
Jim.
They moved Grasu to center.
And move.
Cody Whitehair. Cody Whitehair.
Well, there's the other interesting thing. a lot of times the writer's reaction is, okay, Whitehair had a great rookie year. Grassu, even though he's a high draft pick himself, missed a year because of injury. What I like is what I'm seeing is those two guys now, because of what the Bears are doing, could be interchangeable parts. And they, at some point in time, because Josh Sitton is already in his 10th year, so, hopefully Sitton will have another good year for us. But at some point in time, either Grassu or Whitehair is probably going to be one of our offensive guards.
Yeah.
Okay, one of them is going to be the center, one of them is going to be a guard. I just like I like what I see happening in terms of depth. Nothing against Zach Miller, a really fine player who's had a lot of injury issues.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised. I think I said it on the air here a couple of shows ago. Wouldn't be surprised to see Zach Miller, not with the Bears at the end of training camp. I think it's a definite possibility.
That's a very strong possibility that he won't make the ball club.
Yeah.
I'm finding it, and it was almost laughable yesterday between, I don't know if there were too many calls or they didn't let him in the air, or you start seeing Facebook comments or Twitter comments that now we're going to find out. How much the Bears screwed up Cutler while he was here. Yeah.
We're going to find out that really it should have been McGowan all along.
Oh, well, you know what my prediction would be? I think Jay Cutler will step in and do a really nice. Actually,
he's going to be.
I'll tell you what. My opinion, they just upgraded their quarterback position by the fact. Tannehill is a good quarterback. I think Cutler, because of his relationship with Gase, I would assume they have some weapons down there that he might not have had in Chicago.
Yeah.
I think you see a good year out of Jay
I think
Cutler.
you're going to see a decent year out of it.
Yeah.
I'm listening to some of the talking heads, and I've never seen anybody reserve quarterback or a quarterback being signed that everybody decided that they know how to play the game better.
Say that again, Jim.
That I've never seen such a reaction from some of these talking heads. That you see a quarterback signed to a contract, and all these talking heads think, well, I can play the game better than him.
Oh my God! Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I would say this. One of the things that you said as we got into the Cutler part of this, I believe you said that some of the people on Twitter and Facebook and stuff are saying things like, now we'll see how screwed up how the Bears screwed Cutler up.
Yeah,
I think these are two. You have to. Just take a curtain and separate Jay Cutler's time with the Bears from what's going to happen here with the Dolphins.
Exactly.
I don't think one has any. Does it have a little bit to do? One have a little bit to do with the other? Yeah, a little bit. But no, if Cutler comes out and has a really nice year, don't be saying the Bears screwed up Cutler, because as we've talked about,
or we should have kept him,
or that we should have kept him another year.
Yeah.
It's two totally two separate things.
I'm listening to this and I'm going, what does the Dolphins signing Jay Cutler have to do with the Bears? Not one damn thing.
No, nothing. Nothing at all.
No.
That's the way I see it. And honestly, you saw that Jay Cutler was seriously going to be an announcer.
Sure.
And
a lot of people said.
And I'll tell you what.
And the early comments was, he's good.
I heard that he was good. And you know what? I hear the guys at Coffee, they'll say, "Oh, I can't wait to hear him on the air," because they would take what they would see.
They would translate
his interviews after the game with stupid questions that he probably heard 50 times, and is bored with it, as opposed to. When you have been in the NFL as long as Jay Cutler as a quarterback, believe me, when you listen to that guy talk, if you're a casual fan, which we all are, he's going to make your head spin because he knows so much more. Sure. You think you know something, you don't know anything.
You don't know a thing compared
to him. That's fact.
So. And you hear the dumb questions, and I always thought the classic response to the dumb question was Peyton Manning when they asked him, "What does Omaha mean?"
Oh.
What does it mean when you say, oh, well, it means, different things at different times. It might mean something when we're wearing our home uniforms. It might mean something where we're wearing our road uniforms. It might mean something if we're going, in one direction on the field. And he's doing this all deadpan, and you're sitting there going, he's tired of that question.
Jim, you know what that makes me think of? I was talking with Jim Matthews one day in the library, and I said, Jim, the other day we were talking about, he said, I think every kid thought with a chance they could be a major leaguer. And I was like, Jim, I get what you're saying. I don't agree with that. But that comment led on to a further conversation. And I said, Jim, there's no way I could do, say, with Joe Madden or John Fox or any of these guys who run a team. I said, you know what? Thinking about what those guys have to do, and I'm not talking about dealing with the media or anything, but say a Major League Baseball manager, the way the game is played today, how many innings is in this guy's arm? How many innings should I play this guy to keep him sharp? How many innings do I have to play this guy to keep him from getting too tired?
Yeah.
It would give me a headache. I would quit after about a week because I would be so in over my head I couldn't even stand it. And to me, what these guys do is just really work. I mean, as far as the head part of it. And, when you bring up what made me think about this, when you bring up the comment on Omaha, and how did you say it? Well, it could mean something if we're in our home uniforms. It could mean something else in the second quarter as opposed to the first quarter. All of these different things that these guys throw in to try to keep the other team off balance and keep them from knowing what they're doing. It's enough to make your head blow off your shoulders.
And it was kind of interesting too. And Dana and I got in a discussion about this last night when I brought up Sparky Anderson's name, and the fact that he only played the 1 year in the majors,
right?
Was about 7 or 8 years total his playing career,
right?
And I said, and he started managing the Reds in 1970. And she, well, what did he do prior to that? I said, honestly, I don't know. And she said, how many successful ball players, major league ball players, had really successful careers as a manager? And I said, you know what? As I think about it, not that many.
That's a good point, because I'm trying to think of what. Of course, then you'd have to define what you mean by successful,
right? And I said probably the greatest hitter in the game, at least in the era that we grew up watching. Ted Williams managed 2 years, I think, in the major leagues. And she said, why wasn't he successful? I said, he had, and I think the more successful they are, the harder those players have, harder it is for those players to relate to somebody who may not have the talent that they do.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Yeah. And she said, did Babe Ruth ever manage? And I said, no, Babe Ruth never managed. He said I said Babe Ruth was resentful near the end of his career when he wanted the opportunity to manage, and they had Joe McCarthy. When they had Joe McCarthy manage, he resented the fact that he didn't get the Yankee job. He coached with the Dodgers and never had the chance to manage.
Mm-hmm.
Others that I tried to think of, I said probably a guy who had absolutely a nondescript major league career, but was, how many games did Tony La Russa win?
Yeah, that's true. Tony La Russa barely played in the. I mean, he played a little bit, but that was it.
Yeah. And going back, Stengel was a journeyman.
Yeah,
Joe Madden never played in the major leagues, but was a baseball junkie.
Right. He played some minor. He played in the minors, but the low minors. Never even made the high minors. I don't think.
And I said, there's guys who love the game and start to learn to be able to relate to the game, and relate. Maybe don't have the talent, but are able to relate to players to be able to get it out, get the talent out of them. That's why Madden is such a one that's such great for the mind games and the manipulation and thinking 3 moves ahead. Sparky Anderson was the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it, when he was hired by the Reds in 1970, and they go, who's he?
Yeah, no, that's true.
And he won the World Series his first year out, I think, if I remember right, 1970. They won 102 ball games. I think they won the World.
I think they might have been in the World Series but lost. Because I want to say the only reason I know that or think that's the case is Lee May,
who just passed away recently.
I've read his obituary, and he had a really nice series, and I want to say that might have been the one that he had the good series, and I think they might have lost. But I'm not sure about it. You could be right. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
not sure.
I should have brought the tab. I should have brought my tablet along today, and we could have had baseballreference.com.
Actually, Jim, I think that managing the actual game is the easy part. All of the preparation and everything is really the more difficult part of it.
And you're going to have to look at, just like you said, who's available in the bullpen, who's been working too much lately.
Yeah.
Got to give him a rest today. Can't really use him. He went too long last night. And I mean, I think about Madden talking about bunting situations and all the thought processes in a bunting situation, where it may look like a great situation to bunt, but you got to think of, okay, who's up now, who's on deck, who's in the hole,
right?
Do I want to waste an out just to move somebody over, where I could be able to have somebody hit away and maybe get 2 runs out of it?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting thought process that they have to go through. I would say that I don't know. It's people look at it. The other day, Wade Davis has had a little bump in the road here after really.
He's been having
when you convert 20-some save situations in a row successfully. To me, I mean, you're a numbers guy, Jim.
Sure.
The numbers should tell you might hit a little bump.
You're gonna hit a.
But I saw Madden's comment was something to the effect. I think he was having a little trouble locating one of his pitches, and that he'll work through it.
Yeah.
And it seems to me like sometimes they don't say it right out, but it seems like the writers and the media people they want Madden to say the sky is falling, Wade Davis, and Madden will say, you know what, I think this will work itself out, okay?
Yeah.
But even if he didn't think it was going to work itself out, what is he supposed to say? I think we're going to kick Wade Davis on the ash heap because he can't pitch anymore,
and we're going to we're going to put Justin Wilson in there because we just got him, and we want to look at what the closer is going to be for next year in case Wade Davis decides to go free agency.
Right.
But I'm looking at Davis, at least the stats as of yesterday, 23 save opportunities, converted 23 of them.
Yeah. So
talking about Carl Edwards. Oh, he's got some confidence issues. And that's not just him saying that because of that. You ask Carl Davis, what do you... Well, I'm not too confident with...
Well, think about this. What I've been thinking about is you went through a long season, and it was last year Edwards' first full season?
He had I think he had a cup of coffee in 15.
Okay. So now this would be his second full season.
This is actually his first full season in the majors. He came up at some point last year.
Okay. And think of the physicality of the man. He's he's a string bean, to put it, in our vernacular of when we were kids. He may just be physically tired at this point because he's not a big man. Okay,
that's right.
It doesn't mean that maybe if he doesn't pitch for a week, he kicks back. Maybe they put him on the DL or they just don't use him. Recharge your batteries and you're okay. But at this point, he may have hit a little bit of a wall at this point.
No, yeah, that's very possible. That's very possible. Everybody's going to reach that point.
Mm-hmm. The big thing is the veteran players have reached that point prior to this and know maybe how to work their way through it a little bit better.
Yeah.
So,
Edwards, by the way, did you get, just thinking about Edwards, did you get a chance to see the clip of the bullpens during the Diamondbacks bullpen and the Cubs bullpen during the rain delay last week?
No.
Oh, it was hysterical. It was hysterical. Of course, they're watching each other on the screens.
Okay.
And you got the Diamondbacks bullpen, and they line up the chairs, and they're doing a bobsled race.
Okay.
They all lined up on there and doing a bobsled race back and forth. And the Cub bullpen, the Edwards was sitting in a chair, leaning back, and he was like he was casting out there and catching something. I don't know who it was, but one of the players went running by with his finger in his mouth like he was hooked by the fish. Edwards is trying to reel him in. I thought, rain delay theater was was a lot of fun, and I think the topper was the Diamondbacks bullpen doing bowling.
They were doing bowling?
Yes, they lined up they lined up, they had the 7-10 split, and I don't know who it was. The player kind of rolled his way up there, hit the 7-pin, knocked it over in the 10-pin, and whoever was the 10-pin wobbled back and forth for a little bit and then finally fell over.
Oh, jeez, I like that.
They looked back they looked up at the monitors towards the Cub bullpen, and the Cub bullpen was just going, you win.
Jim, I usually don't read the Sunday paper, so sometimes I'll miss the Sunday news if anything has happened on Saturday. But are the Bulls still? Is Dwayne Wade still part of the Bulls?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I noticed we were getting towards the end of our time. I wanted to ask you that question because I didn't know if I had missed anything or
no.
If
there's
really been not much said about that.
Nothing much has been said lately, and I think he's going to come into camp. But you're not going to. I don't think you're going to see him here the whole season.
Let me ask you this. The other day, the Sox signed a guy, or they picked a guy off waivers. I think his name is DJ Peterson from, I want to say he came from the Mariners. And
yeah, you did.
The thought I've been having with all of these trades is, well, there's two things. Either was the Sox minor league system so bereft of talent that, I mean, they've brought in a lot of players, and once you move these players in,
18 players. Was that something
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
You move these players in, somebody's got to move out. So was that system so terrible that those guys were just replaced that quickly?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Okay.
It wouldn't surprise me if you went and looked, if you go to Baseball Reference, and I haven't done that, but if you go to baseballreference.com and look at the Sox minor league system, start to look at, who's there, and I don't know if they indicate, might be able to click on the name and see if there's any transaction, if the player's been released or whatever, or demoted or whatever. The Sox minor league system was bereft of talent for a long time. And
wow.
you can go back to Kenny Williams when they had talent there, and he'd try to go for the quick fix and deal it away.
Huh.
And that was the complaint.
Because I was thinking, there's only, you can collect a lot of talent, but you also have to have time for those guys to play in whatever setting you're going to put them in.
Sure, and you're going to get to the point where, if these guys are blocked, say you've got somebody up on a higher level or in the major league level where these guys are blocked, well, now you have currency.
Yeah, that's true.
Because I'm thinking probably 2 or 3 years from now, maybe 3 years from now, Sox are going to have a doggone good ball club.
They should. I mean, they should.
And you're going to need to fill in. You might need to fill in some slots come some trade deadline, pitching slots or something. But by golly, all of a sudden you got some currency down in the minor league system. You can deal.
The only thing that makes me hesitate about the Sox, the fact that you see almost every time it's mentioned, they have 10 of the top 68 prospects in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
I think to myself, though, not guys that they've developed, but guys who've come from other systems. Right. And how well does a guy adapt? Say he learned how to do something in somebody else's system. Some guys are hard-headed. They don't want to change.
Yeah, you brought that up. That's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about that. You have guys who have grown up learning the deal with the players that went from the Cub system, the Cub way.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you're going to be doing something else.
Right.
A lot of people thought that the reason Samardzija had such a hard time when he was here was Cooper was trying to break him of the things that he had been doing in the Cub system. No, you've got to do it my way.
Yeah.
And that could have been the thing that screwed his head up.
Yeah. I mean, it's sometimes if it isn't broke, what I could see in a case like what you're talking about, if what you're saying is correct, say about a guy, just the example you use, Cooper and Samardzija. Samardzija is well known to have really good stuff. To me, where it would seem to be right, I don't know that I'm saying that I am right, but it seemed like it would be right if Cooper would do more work with his thinking than with his mechanics.
Yeah.
Because if his mechanics are right,
yeah.
He's got the pitches are good. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Then maybe it's the thinking that's needs to be worked on.
Yeah.
But I don't know, and I don't know what that situation was.
I think that's a situation. I think that's why Chris Bosio has done well. He's worked with them more on their thinking and not necessarily the mechanics.
Well,
some guys have to find their own mechanics and adjust it. A lot of people think that's why Arrieta, since the All-Star break, he's finally found out what his problems are.
Sure.
And figured it out.
Sure.
And has been able to do it. And Chris Bosio has helped with the thought processes or whatever else they need. Don't try to go, no, you got to do it my way.
Well, I think it is the nature of the beast. Whatever, and it doesn't matter what sport. When you're going well, like said, the idea you used was Arrieta. Well, you're lights out.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, though, I think the tendency is to, no matter how disciplined you are in your mind, it starts to become almost the idea. Maybe it's in the back of your head, not in the front of your head. I can just go out there and do this. And in reality is you can't just go out there and do it. You have to do the same things you were doing. And when you start to get that attitude of, I'm hot, I'm just going to go out there and blow them away. I'm not saying that was his thinking, but that thinking can slip in. Then you start to lose what it is that you had because your mind isn't totally right. A guy who's hot with the bat, he's hitting everything hard. Well, pretty soon he's swinging at everything, and he's not hitting everything hard anymore. So because he's stopped doing what got him hot, on the hot streak in the first place.
That's right. Or they figured it out.
Yeah,
on the other side.
That's true.
The other side. Hey, there was one more thing I wanted to talk about, and I got a kick out of it the other day, when I saw this today. Vince Woolfolk is retiring.
From the Patriots and the Texans.
And the Texans. He's retiring from the Texans.
Okay. Wow.
And he's had 11
No, he's had a long career.
He's had
it
11
just seems
years.
Like
it seems like yesterday. I thought about that. But I got a kick out of his retirement announcement. 2 years ago. I think it was last season. Hard Knocks was following the Texans. that was following Houston. And Woolfolk came to camp wearing coveralls and cowboy boots, which was a big entrance. So he posted his retirement announcement on Twitter. He's got the cowboy boots, and he's got the cowboy boots, and he's got the coveralls on. But you see him, and you just see him taking off his cleats and hanging them up in a locker. And he goes, and he reaches over and he takes over. It looks like he's taking some barbecue tools out. And you hear him say, "I'm hanging up my cleats. I'm turning now to smoked meats." He's having a retirement party on the opening day of football season, and it's being sponsored by Kingsford Charcoal.
Oh, wow.
I thought it was a funny announcement, but when I saw, Vince's tailgate party sponsored by Kingsford Charcoal, I thought, okay, that's a little much, but he had a good career, and it was a funny way of announcing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
He had a really good career.
He had a really good career, but I'm hanging up my cleats, and I'm turning to smoked meats.
So are we ready to hang up this broadcast now?
I think we are going to do
went
that.
like 6 or 7 minutes over.
Well, we always seem to wander off. We never can keep time.
We can't.
No, John just sits there and goes, just let him talk.
Let
him babble on a little bit more. All right, we're going to get the heck out of here and let John go off to do whatever John needs to do during the day, and we'll do the same.
Yes.
And we'll get together a couple of weeks from now and do this nonsense all over again.
Wow. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll figure out what to talk about. We'll have some football to talk about then.
Yeah, definitely.
Pennant races. I didn't even get into that today, so we'll see what happens. All right, thanks for listening. We had a good time. I think we did. Once again, when we don't plan anything, it seems to go well. All right, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Until then, we're taillights.
I know the.
You have been listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Wednesday, August the 9th on Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. This broadcast was directed by John DeVita, and our special thanks to radio station manager Kevin Zeflik of WRHS FM Norwich and the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, Mr. John Chikanda. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Tuesday, August the 8th, the year 2017. Until next time, please be safe and thanks for listening. And this is Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich. Have a great day, everyone.